Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and we're back for another day of set reviews. Today we're going to talk about all of the red cards in Theros Beyond Death from a limited perspective, but let's jump right on in. You all know the disclaimers by now, no need to go over them. Up first is the Akroan War. The Akroan War is 3 and a red for an enchantment saga at rare. Act 1, gain control of target creature for as long as the Akroan War remains on the battlefield. Do not untap it, do not give it haste. You just get it. Act 2, until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able. Act 3, each tapped creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. I like almost nothing about this card. Stealing a creature but not giving it haste, woof. Getting Alpha Striked, that's one of those things where there's situations where it'll be amazing and just as many situations where it's awful, which means this will be a dead card at times, like cast it and you're dead kind of dead. Then if my opponent's creature's stats line up correctly, you know, they're 4/4s or 4/3s or 4/2s, not 2/4s or 3/4s or etc. And how many 3/4s for 4 have we seen so far? Then they'll die, but they may not line up right. There's just way too much uncertainty involved in this card for me to ever want to bother playing it. At the end of all that, my opponent gets the creature back that I stole, unless I chumped with it or sacked it or something. So I have this card at an F just because I don't ever want to play it. There will be games where somebody resolves this and it just ends the game. They steal the biggest, scariest threat from the opponent's side of the board. They have a board state of their own that perfectly lines up so that on Act 2, they just get to pick off all the creatures who won't die during Act 3. And then during Act 3, the rest of them kill themselves. But you don't have any control over that. You don't control what your opponent's playing. You don't control that they're going to have creatures of the correct stats. You don't know that you're going to be in that situation where that Alpha Strike that they're going to do to you is the best thing that could ever happen. There's so many times where you're going to be behind on board state and getting Alpha Striked is the worst thing that could happen. There's so many times where, you know, you're going to be a low enough life total that you can't take the 1 or 2 creatures that will be coming through unblocked because you don't have enough creatures to block. There's going to be so many times where your opponent's stats don't line up right, so the creatures hitting themselves don't do anything. So I have this card at an F because I never ever want to play it, and that for me is an F. That does not mean that this card will never win the game. I just think there's way too many times where this card is dead in your hand, and that is not a card I play. F for the Akroan War. Up next is Anax, Hardened in the Forge. Anax, Hardened in the Forge is 1 red for a legendary enchantment creature demigod at uncommon. He's a star 3. Anax's power is equal to your devotion to red. Whenever Anax or another non-token creature you control dies, create a 1/1 red satyr creature token with this creature can't block. If the creature had power 4 or greater, create 2 of those tokens instead. Like Caliph, I think this is much better due to the power growing rather than the toughness. As well, popping out 1/1s or 2/1/1s when something dies means you just get to keep swinging. A very aggressive card that'll fit right into that aggro plan. I actually look at some of the red cards and, I've mentioned this, but I think this is not the Theros that we remember. I think this is going to be an attacky version of Theros. B- for Anax, Hardened by the Forge. Up next is Arena Trickster. Arena Trickster is 3 and a red for a creature human shaman at common. He's a 3/3 who charges you 10,000 coins to play Brawl. He's tricky like that. Whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Arena Trickster. So it's a 4 mana 3/3, which is not good these days, especially since we now seem to be getting 4 mana 3/4s on the regular. So prior to the payoff, he's like a really weak C-. But if you're triggering it, it quickly becomes a C, and then a C+, and then a C+, and then a C+, and then a C+. This caps out at C+. So yeah, if you're in the deck, play it, and if you're not, cut it if possible. C+ in the right deck for Arena Trickster. Up next is Aspect of Manticore. Aspect of Manticore is 2 and a red for an enchantment or at common. It's got flash enchant creature. When Aspect of Manticore enters the battlefield, enchanted creature gains first strike until end of turn, unfortunately. Enchanted creature gets +2/+0. So unfortunately, the first strike only being until end of turn means this isn't quite as good as the very similar cards to this we've seen in the past, but those were uncommon. This is a common. Still, this is a solid combat trick. I do like the +2/+0, +3/+0 first strike combat tricks, but 3 is a touch pricey. I'm used to paying like 1 mana for that, or perhaps 2. But you get to keep the +2/+0, which is nice. Probably a fine enough C. If you're red-white or red-green, you're probably getting some Constellation off of it too. It's not a card that you're going out of your way to pick up. It's not a card that you're going to miss if you don't get to play it. So it is just a C. C for Aspect of Manticore. Up next is Blood Aspirant. Blood Aspirant is 1 and a red for a creature Satyr Berserker red uncommon. It's a 1/1. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Blood Aspirant. Pay 1 and a red, tap, sacrifice a creature or enchantment. Blood Aspirant deals 1 damage to target creature. That creature can't block this turn. So obviously at first this creature kind of sucks, being a 1/1 for 2, but the second you have that first sack, it becomes totally okay, and from there on out it's very decent. And as we've seen already in black, we know that there's sacrifice outlets in this set. Some of them are very cheap. There are a way or two to steal creatures from your opponent. So I think this card can just get there. It does take some work to get there, but then it gets there. Also, being able to turn off a blocker could be the thing that wins you the game, which is also pretty decent. I think all told, as long as you are black-red specifically, this card is probably like a very strong C+. I, in fact, think it might even be a B- in that black-red deck. Outside of the black-red deck, I don't think this card's very good. I don't know that red-white, red-green, red-blue wants to be sacrificing stuff left and right. So in the right deck, C+, B-. Outside of that deck, more like a C-. Up next is Careless Celebrant. Careless Celebrant is 1 and a red for a creature Satyr Shaman at uncommon. It's a 2/1. When Careless Celebrant dies, it deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Another red card that just screams aggro to me. It's a 2/1 for 2. That's a C- C card. You'll play it, especially in an aggro deck, but this one trades up, like way up. This trades for 4 drops, some 5 drops. There's 6 drops that this will kill. This will kill an Archon of the Falling Stars. This seems very solid, but obviously if you're not aggro, it goes down in value. In the right deck though, which is a deck that plays creatures and turns them sideways, this might even be a B-. B- for Careless Celebrant. Up next is Dreamshaper Shaman. Dreamshaper Shaman is 5 and a red for an enchantment creature Minotaur Shaman at uncommon. It's a 5/4. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 2 and a red and sacrifice a non-land permanent. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land permanent card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This card just feels way too expensive to me. It's 6 mana to even get it onto the board, which means you're probably not activating it the first time, which means you have to untap with it, and then you still have to get through that turn with it. And then if you have something that you want to pay 2 and a red and sack, you can hopefully upgrade that thing. But of course you might not, depending on what you sack. If you have a bunch of tokens or something, that could be a way to go about it, because you can sack a token to this, just non-land. But yeah, I just feel like there's better, cheaper sack outlets. I feel like this is a very cute thing. It may work better in sealed, where, you know, the format will be slower just because sealed is always slower. But in draft, I'm just not sure that I want to jam this much resources into this card for a random card off the top of my library, or 2 cards down, or however far down we have to go to find one. So yeah, I have this at like a D+. I'm going to keep an eye on it because I could be horribly wrong, but it just feels like way too much mana for what it is. Up next is Dreamstalker Manticore. Dreamstalker Manticore is 2 and a red for an enchantment creature Manticore at uncommon. It's a 4/2. Whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, Dreamstalker Manticore deals 1 damage to any target. Yeah, pinging a target for 1 damage. This still is not the payoff that I want for the play on your opponent's turn deck. I talked about this in blue. I'm going to talk more about it today. I don't see the payoffs for this deck being good enough. And this card just doesn't really get there either. A 4/2 is also fairly weak, but it is 3 mana. We're usually paying 4 mana for that, and I really don't like paying 4 mana for it. Paying 3 mana is fine, because I'll pay 3 mana for a 3/2. I think this is like a C in any deck because the stats are okay, and if you're in the right deck, I still just think it's a C. 1 damage is not that exciting, and because it's just for the first spell each turn, you can't even like double ping something. So just a C for Dreamstalker Manticore, and a C for the whole blue-red deck until I actually get my hands on it and see that it has real payoffs. Up next is Escape Velocity. Escape Velocity is a single red mana for an enchantment Oread uncommon. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has haste. Escape for 1 and a red and exile 2 other cards from your graveyard. I've never been a fan of this aura or any variation of it, even in the aura set. Using an entire card to give a creature haste and one little bit of power boost is not really where I want to be. Crystal Slipper is a card that I typically just didn't really care about. It had niche, playability places, and it played way better on Arena due to reasons. But yeah, I have this at like a D. I think some Arena-style aggro decks will be fine with it, but we don't rate cards for Arena here. We rate for the real world. So just a D for Escape Velocity. The Escape doesn't really help out its grade at all. D for Escape Velocity. Up next is Fateful End. Fateful End is 2 and a red for an instant at uncommon. Fateful End deals 3 damage to any target. Scry 1. Solid, great, first pickable in some packs. It hits creatures, it hits faces, it scries 1, it slices, it dices. It's totally solid. It's a strong B. It's not going to go any higher because, of course, it's only going to kill X3s or perhaps after combat something bigger, but it does go to the opponent's face, and that's just great. So actually I think it's a B+. B+ for Fateful End. Up next is Final Flare. Final Flare is 2 and a red for an instant at common. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature or enchantment. Final Flare deals 5 damage to target creature when you really, really want something dead. It's a cool include for the black-red sack deck if you're getting additional bonuses off the creature dying or being sacked, or if you've stolen a creature and sacrificed it. It's around like the C+ range just because there are times where you're not going to be able to afford sacking something, or you may not even have something to sack, and that's unfortunate for a spell that you really need to use to get back into the game by killing a creature. So strong C+ for Final Flare. Up next is Flummoxed Cyclops. Flummoxed Cyclops is 3 and a red for a creature Cyclops at common. It's a 4/4 with reach. Whenever 2 or more creatures your opponents control attacked, Flummoxed Cyclops can't block this combat. It gets too confused. You know how to get around this downside? Don't block. Don't be the blocker. Just attack with this. It's a 4/4 in red for 4. Attack. But still, I think this is just like a solid C+, because of course, you're not always going to be ahead and always be the attacker. There are some times where you'll fall behind. Your opponent will just be the better attacker, and in those cases, this can't block. So C+ for Flummoxed Cyclops. I think it's a very solid aggressive card, and yeah, I'm going to put, as much as I want to be bouncing creatures with auras and being blue-black in this set, I think aggro might be the way to go. C+ for Flummoxed Cyclops. Up next is Furious Rise. Furious Rise is 2 and a red for an enchantment at uncommon. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card until you exile another card with Furious Rise. This is some cute card draw for red, but boy, do you need to be sure you're always able to do this. Otherwise, I'm not sure that any red deck can deal with taking turn 3 off to cast this, or turn 4 off, or turn 5 probably you have to take off to cast this. I think that if you're certain that you're always going to be getting this card, it's like a C+, but I think I'm never going to be certain about that, so I'm going to start this closer to an F. Boy, do you need to be positive that you have some beef on the board all the time. Probably best at home in red-green, but yeah, I'm avoiding this to start real hard. It reminds me, of course, of Colossal Majesty, but it's in the wrong color, and it's in a set that I think is going to be aggressive. Up next is Hero of the Games. Hero of the Games is 2 and a red for a creature human soldier at common. It's a 3/2. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Hero of the Games, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. It's a red hero, just like the other heroes we saw in white. Nice aggressive creature, 3 mana for 3/2 is fine, we know that, and getting to +1/+0 your team, including itself, is nice. It's a solid card for those aggro decks, and will be a solid C+. Even if you never ever trigger it, it's still like a C that you'll play when you desperately need a creature. So strong C+ for Hero of the Games. This and the other heroes are going to make the red-white aggro deck pretty darn scary. Up next is Heroes of the Revel. Heroes of the Revel is 4 and a red for a creature Satyr soldier at uncommon. It's a 4/4. When Heroes of the Revels enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 red Satyr creature token with this creature can't block. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Heroes of the Revel, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So it's a 5/5 for 5, which is a little expensive for most red decks generally. I typically want my 5-drops in red to be like the big scary flying dragon or something that's going to end the game. and a generic 4/4 and a 1/1 that can't block doesn't quite get there. You do have to be pick and choosy with your 5-drops in, heavy aggro decks, and often the pick or the choice is to not play them. So I'm a little bit more down on Heroes of the Revel, but if you are gonna get there, it's a totally fine card. It's a 5/5 for 5 in red, with that heroic ability. If the set is a little tiny bit less aggro than I'm thinking, by which I mean the aggro decks aren't 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop aggro, but rather are like 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop aggro, then this could be your curve topper and could be fine. But I am going to be a little bit hesitant about it in my red-white aggro decks. I'm going to want to, initially at least, lean more towards, capping out at 4 rather than capping out at 5. So I think this is like a C. Obviously, if it does turn out to be not too expensive, it can jump right on up to a C+, maybe even a B-, because you are, flooding a board with that extra token. But if it is too expensive, as I think, it might drop down to a C-. So we'll see. It's within that C range, I think. But it's going to be format dependent. Up next is Impending Doom. Impending Doom is 2 and a red for an enchantment aura at uncommon. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +3/+3 and attacks each combat if able. When enchanted creature dies, Impending Doom deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. This is Oaken form. 2 and a green, +3/+3 aura, with 2 downsides. And it's upshifted in rarity to uncommon. I don't understand why this card exists. There's better auras out there, ones that won't bolt you when the creature inevitably dies. And I hear some of you saying, put this on your opponent's creature and make them attack. That's not a good plan. If your opponent interferes with that at all, congrats, you've given them a giant creature. I want to put this in the F range just to tell you how badly you should not play it. But I know people don't like me giving out Fs, so F for Impending Doom. Up next is Incendiary Oracle. Incendiary Oracle is 1 and a red for a creature human shaman at common. It's a 2/2. Pay 1 and a red. Incendiary Oracle gets +1/+0 until end of turn. If a creature dealt damage by Incendiary Oracle this turn would die, exile it instead. It's a bear with an upside. Relatively weak upside though, probably just a C. Expensive fire breathing is rarely good. We're looking for double fire breathing or something like that. And the exile instead of destroy is only important in some matchups. Looks like a C at best to me. I don't know that we're going to push up to a C+ on this. C for Incendiary Oracle. Up next is Infuriate. Infuriate is a single red mana for an instant at common. Target creature gets +3/+2 until end of turn. That's right. It's ever so slightly worse giant growth. If you're in aggro, you'll play it, and if you're not, you probably won't. Thus ends my rating. C for Infuriate. Up next is Iroas's Blessing. Iroas's Blessing is 3 and a red for an enchantment aura at common. Enchant creature you control. When Iroas's Blessing enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1. So 4 mana sorcery speed, 4 damage to a creature, but you must have a creature on the board. As a bonus, that creature does get +1/+1. That's kind of cool, I guess. This is probably fine, but it's a step down from good burn removal, because this doesn't bring you back from being behind if your board's empty. And, a lot of cards don't, sure, but a permanent does, or a burn spell that doesn't require a permanent. So I think this is like a B-. That still, of course, is a decently high grade. You're always playing this 100% of the time, but this does have some hoops to jump through to actually get something dead, so B- for Iroas's Blessing. Up next is a Reverent Reveler. A Reverent Revelers is 2 and a red for a creature Satyr at common. It's a 2/2. When a Reverent Revelers enters the battlefield, choose 1. Destroy target artifact, or Irreverent Revelers gains haste until end of turn. Beyond being very hard to say, I'm not really all that in on a 2/2 haste for 3. It's not really interesting. I prefer my gremlins from Kaladesh that were 3/3s for 3 with haste. Getting to kill an artifact, that's cool, I guess, but there's not really that many artifacts in the set or ones worth killing. This just seems deeply mediocre in like the D range. Side it in if there is a very scary artifact. Otherwise, play better cards. D for Irreverent Revelers. Up next is Nyxborn Brute. Nyxborn Brute is 3 red for an enchantment creature Cyclops at common. It's a 7/3 with flavor text. I'm not a big fan of a 7/3 for 5. I didn't like Yargle, and I don't like this. Devotion also basically doesn't exist in red. You have Purphoros and Anax, and that's it. Common, you have nothing. Constellation doesn't exist in red. Yeah, there's no reason to play this card. Like, at all. It's an F. Don't play it. Up next is Omen of the Forge. Omen of the Forge is 1 and a red for an enchantment at common. It's got flash. When Omen of the Forge enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target. Pay 2 and a red, sacrifice Omen of the Forge, scry 2. Expensive Shock is fine, and getting to scry later in the game is nice. Easy B-, solid card, I like it. B- for Omen of the Forge. Up next is Oread of Mountain's Blaze. Oread of Mountain's Blaze is 1 and a red for an enchantment creature nymph at common. It's a 1/3, pay 2 and a red, discard a card, draw a card. It's Merchant of the Veil, except it only costs 2 and you don't get the haggle part of it. Yeah, it's a rummager. We'll see if it has a home in this format. Aggro decks won't really care for it too much. I guess the blue-red on your opponent's turn might, just so that they have something to do with the mana in case they don't cast something. Probably pretty deck dependent, and probably waffles between the C- C+ range. C- C+ for Oread of Mountain's Blaze. Up next is Ox of Agonas. Ox of Agonas is 3 red for a not legendary creature Ox. At Mythic, it's a 4/2. When Ox of Agonas enters the battlefield, discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. Escape red, exile 8 other cards from your graveyard. Ox of Agonas escapes with a +1/+1 counter on it. So a 5 mana 4/2 is not something I want to play. I don't want to play that for 4 mana, but you do get to draw 3 and hopefully discard nothing because your hand's empty is quite nice and makes this probably just fine. The escape is ludicrous, and I think you should pretend that you're never going to do it. 8 cards from the yard is just insane, especially because it's 9, including this card. That's a quarter of your deck that needs to be in the graveyard, and that just doesn't happen with any real regularity. If you can escape it, it's going to be a great, but I would never ever plan to ever be escaping with this creature. Still, because it is 5 mana for true draw 3 cards, I think this is still in the B range. It's definitely not in the A range, but I think it can just be a B. So let's go B for Ox of Agonas, and I don't really ever plan on escaping this. Up next is Phoenix of Ash. Phoenix of Ash is 1 red for a creature Phoenix at rare. It's a 2/2 flying haste. Pay 2 and a red. Phoenix of Ash gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Escape 2 red, exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. Much more reasonable. Phoenix of Ash escapes with a +1/+1 counter on it. This is totally solid. A 2/2 haste with double-ish fire breathing, and flying is just what red wants. This could end some games pretty quickly, and even if it's answered, it's a pretty easy escape and is bigger the second time around, or third time around. Since 3 cards is not too bad. You could return this 3 times for the cost of that big dumb Ox's escape cost. Not quite in bomb territory, since it won't just end games immediately, but it won't take too long after that if unanswered. B+, strong B+ for Phoenix of Ash. Up next is Portent of Betrayal. Portent of Betrayal is 3 and a red for a sorcery at common. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. Scry 1. Here is your act of treason for the set. This is a card that Black-Red is going to adore because it actually says pay 4, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. Scry 1. Attack with that creature. If your opponent didn't choose to kill their own creature during that combat step, sacrifice it for more bonuses. I really like Black-Red Sacrifice decks. Now, if you are not in Black-Red Sacrifice, this card goes way down in value. It's like a D. You should only play it if you are super hyper aggro, and even then, if you find out that you're going to end up in board stalls, you still probably side this out. But if you're Black-Red Sac, this card's going to be like a strong C+, maybe even a B-. If you are any other deck, D for Portent of Betrayal. Up next is Purphoros Bronze-Blooded. Purphoros Bronze-Blooded is 4 and a red for a legendary enchantment creature god at Mythic. It's 7/6 indestructible. As long as your devotion to red is less than 5, Purphoros isn't a creature. Other creatures you control have haste. Pay 2 and a red. You may put a red creature card or an artifact creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So this does seem like the worst of the gods, and I'm going to jump down from an A+ here. It's expensive, but it is appropriately huge. I think if you know you're going to have a board state, Purphoros is probably still pretty darn good. A 5-mana 7/6 indestructible is great. The static ability is not worth 5 mana because the deck that wants all of its creatures to have haste isn't really gunning for a 5-drop in the first place, and all of its creatures having haste isn't that exciting starting on turn 6 or 7 or later. The sneak attack ability is cute, but again, it's going to happen so late in the game that either you're already ahead and going to win, or your opponent has a board state where the creatures left in your hand may not be big enough to surprise kill them or attack with it. I think Purphoros still does stay in the A range, but I think I'm going to drop him all the way down to an A-. But still an A- because turn him on and a 7/6 indestructible is ludicrous. The rest of the text is what I'm a little bit less sold on. A- for Purphoros Bronze Blooded. Up next is Purphoros' Intervention. Purphoros' Intervention is X red for a sorcery at rare. Choose one. Create an X1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Or Purphoros' Intervention deals twice X damage to target creature or planeswalker. It seems fine. It's a sorcery speed double heat ray, which is an okay card, and how you'll generally always use this card. The elemental part is cute, but it's ludicrously costed compared to the old stand-in Ball Lightning. 6/1 trample, sacrifice at end of your turn, 3 mana. You have to pay 7 mana to get a Ball Lightning out of this card. But still, the benefit of these intervention cards, and this one as well, is that sometimes you're going to draw this card, you're going to look at the board, you're going to count your mana, and you're going to go, oh, there's enough trample damage that I win the game, and you're going to cast that elemental side. It's going to happen way less common than you're just going to kill a creature, but it will be a nice game ender when it does happen. Like Erebos' Intervention, it's super totally fine for that one removal mode that you'll mostly use with a nice upside, and I think it's a nicer upside than Erebos' for those rare times. So I do think Purphoros' Intervention is just a solid A-. Up next is Satyr's Cunning. Satyr's Cunning is a single red mana for a sorcery at common. Create a 1/1 red Satyr creature token with this creature can't block. Escape 2 in a red, exile 2 other cards from your graveyard. I do not want this. I don't want it at all. I don't want a 1/1 that can't block for 1 and cost me a card. And I don't want a second 1/1 for 1 that can't block, costing me 3 mana and 2 cards out of my graveyard. So just no interest in Satyr's Cunning. I think it's an F. Never going to touch it. F for Satyr's Cunning. Up next is Skophos Maze-Warden. Skophos Maze-Warden is 3 in a red for a creature Minotaur Warrior at uncommon. It's a 3/4. Pay 1 generic mana. It gets +1/-1 until end of turn. This is the old Flowstone ability. Whenever another creature becomes the target of an ability of a land you control named Labyrinth of Skophos, you may have Skophos Maze-Warden fight target creature. I have no real clue how good this is going to be exactly with the Skophos thing. It's a 3/4 for 4. That's like a C. It's a creature that you can play. You're not going to be super excited, but it's fine. The Flowstone ability is nice. When it's attacking in unblocked, it doesn't take much to make this a huge hit. So I do think this is an easy C+ floor. The Skophos ability is interesting, but Skophos is a rare. This is an uncommon. So honestly, good luck on getting those 2 cards in the same draft to pull this off. If you can, this is 4 mana to fight with this creature during combat. But of course, your opponent's creature has to be attacking or blocking for Skophos to even be able to target it in the first place. We'll review Skophos on the last day. So I think what we do is we just ignore that ability. You're unlikely to have Skophos because it's a rare that you have to open or get past while also having this card. And I think it is a narrower-ish situation in which you will have played Skophos and have played this card and actually be able to activate it. So I think we just ignore all of that. And this is a 3/4 for 4 with a Flowstone ability, which is probably just a fine C+. Flowstone is actually pretty decent. It reminds me of Frostburn Weird from Return to Ravnica, which was also very good, and that was a 1/4 with +1/-1. So I think that this is just a totally solid C+. I think all red decks are going to be very happy with this, and if you do get to do the fight thing, cool, but I'm not going to add any to the card for that. C+ for Skophos' Library Warden. Up next is Skophos Warleader. Skophos Warleader is 4 and a red for a creature Minotaur Warrior at common. It's a 4/5. Pay a single red and sacrifice another creature or an enchantment. Skophos Warleader gets +1/+0 and gains Menace until end of turn. Expensive creature, but a nice cheap sack outlet. The ability is nice and your opponent needs a pair of pretty real creatures to actually trade with this when it's a 5/5 Menace. Seems like a fine enough C+ if you're in a higher curve deck, but this doesn't get too much of a place in an all-out aggro deck. Black-red sack, though, I think is pretty happy with one of these. So C+ for Skophos Warleader. Up next is Stampede Rider. Stampede Rider is 2 and a red for a creature Satyr at common. It's a 2/3 with trample. At the beginning of each combat, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, Stampede Rider gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This looks like a solid 3-drop for the red-green deck. Slightly less so for the red-white deck, since it'll have smaller power creatures pre-auras. But if this is attacking as a 3/4 trample most of the time, it's real solid. If not, it's only fine. I think it's a C+ unless you literally are never going to have Ferocious online. If that's the case, it's like a C-C-. But if this is going to be a 3/4 trampler most of the time, it is a strong C+. C+ for Stampede Rider. Up next is Storm Herald. Storm Herald is 2 and a red for a creature human shaman at rare. It's a 3/2 with haste. When Storm Herald enters the battlefield, return any number of aura cards from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to creatures you control. Exile those auras at the beginning of your next end step. If those auras would leave the battlefield, exile them instead of putting them anywhere else. No. This card's not going to do enough in limited for all of that text there, so this is essentially a vanilla 3/2 for 3, which is a C-C. You'll play that creature. This is definitely like a commander casual jank thing where you're, returning insane auras, you're returning Eldrazi Conscription, not Indomitable Will or Sentinel's Eyes or something like that. So I think this is just a 3/2 haste for 3, which, I guess I forgot about the haste there for a second. I think we can call this a C+ as a 3/2/3 with haste, but that is the ceiling on this card unless the stars absolutely align for you. Up next is Storm's Wrath. Storm's Wrath is 2 red for a sorcery at rare. Storm's Wrath deals 4 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. Wraths aren't my favorite thing in limited. We talked about that with Shatter the Sky. Unless they're cheap, are perfectly in a deck that loves them, something that's probably pretty low creature count and very control-y, or have some other bonus to them. This is conditional. It might hurt you more than it hurts your opponent, and red is not the color that wants to be wrathing in limited basically ever. This is like Anger of the Gods from original Theros. It's just not a card that I'm ever really happy to play. It's an okay sideboard card, but I think people really overrate and overplay these cards in limited. It's just so hard to play really effectively in which you blow out your opponent and don't blow out yourself. And if your opponent has X5s, it just feels awful. So I have Storm's Wrath at a D+. I think it's a strong sideboard option that you should consider, but I don't think it's a card that you really want to play too much otherwise. People are going to play it. They always do. And by the end of the format, they go, oh, it actually wasn't that good for limited. Up next is Tectonic Giant. Tectonic Giant is 2 red for a creature elemental giant at rare. It's a 3/4. Whenever it attacks or becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, choose one. Tectonic Giant deals 3 damage to each opponent, or exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose one of them until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. This card's just great. It's a 4-mana 3/4. On attacks, it deals 3 damage, meaning it hits like a 6/4. Awesome. Or if I really want to, I can get some card selection. I love it. This card is easily first pickable. It'll make every single red deck wildly better. It is absolutely a bomb. I think it is just a solid A for Tectonic Giant. Up next is Thrill of Possibility from the old set of Throne of Eldraine. Thrill of Possibility is 1 and a red for an instant at common. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card, draw 2 cards. Obviously, it's a shoe-in for the blue-red cast on your opponent's turn deck, but this is still kind of eh. I wasn't a big fan of this in Throne of Eldraine, and I think it was way better in Throne of Eldraine. So I think it's like a C- in most red decks, and even the deck that wants it, I think it's kind of like a C. I'm just never a huge fan of this effect. And I think people realized in Throne of Eldraine that outside of the blue-red draw 2 cards deck, it didn't do too much. You don't play it in your aggro decks or anything like that. So C- C for Thrill of Possibility. Up next is the Triumph of Anax. The Triumph of Anax is 2 and a red For an Enchantment Saga add-on common, Act 1, 2, and 3, until end of your turn, target creature gains trample and gets +X+O, where X is the number of lore counters on the Triumph of Anax. Act 4, target creature you control fights up to one target creature you don't control. It's another aggro card. You know, it gets +X+O and trample. Could be pretty scary depending on your board state, depending on what creatures you have, and ending it all with a fight is pretty nice. However, this does require you to have a board state, of course. This does absolutely stone nothing to get you back into a game that you're not already established in. So this does seem that like it's probably a little bit more of a win more card and maybe a bit of a board stall breaker, but a little bit less so. So I'm going to be a little bit hesitant on this. I think I'm going to sit it around the C level. This, of course, is one of those cards where when you play it on 3 and your opponent has stumbled in any way and you're going to curve out, it's going to be insane. And if that perfect situation doesn't happen, it's going to be much less insane. So I'm going to keep this around the C, maybe C+ level, but I'm not going to go any higher than that. So C, maybe C+ for Triumph of Anax. Up next is Underworld Breach. Underworld Breach is 1 and a red for an enchantment. At rare, each land non-card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost, plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. At the beginning of the end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach. So you do only get this for one single turn. So it's 2 mana to let me escape something that doesn't normally have escape. I've already paid 2 mana, so I'm already down 2 mana. You figure most games of Limited, you can expect to hit about 7 lands. It's not too common that you're going to go too much higher than that, meaning that we can return a 5-drop or a 3-drop and a 2-drop or something, assuming that we also have a whole bunch of other cards in it. I just don't think this has any place. There's no real self-mill in red. Yeah, I think this is just way too janky. I think it's meant for Constructed. I don't think it's meant for Limited at all. So I actually have it as an F. I think you just don't play it. F for Underworld Breach. Up next is Underworld Fires. Underworld Fires is 1 and a red for a sorcery at uncommon. Underworld Fires deals 1 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. If a permanent dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead. So this is a sideboard card only against X1s. If you do see multiple X1s, pop this in. And if you don't, leave it in the sideboard. I don't think that I'm ever main decking this. We've seen this before with things like Electrickery, and I'm sure there's other cards that I can't think of the name of. And they're basically always sideboard only. So keep this in the sideboard, and when it comes out of the sideboard, because you did see, 2, 3, 4, 5 X1s, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be a D+ for Underworld Fires. Our second last red card is Underworld Rase-Hound. Underworld Rase-Hound is 1 and a red for a creature elemental hound at common. It's a 3/1. Underworld Rase-Hound attacks each combat if able. Escape 3 and a red, exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. Underworld Rase-Hound escapes with a +1/+1 counter on it. I love 3/1s for 3. This one can't block. That's still kind of okay. We saw that with Rimrock Knight. As long as you're not trading down to a 1 CMC creature or a token, you're still doing fine with this card. And then it can escape later to be a 4/2. That's also totally okay. It's a nice aggressive card. I expect to start out playing these a little bit more than most people will, because I love 3/1s for 2 even when they can't block. But I think this is a very, very, very solid C at best. And of course it could actually turn out to be a C-. But let's go for a C for Underworld Rase-Hound. Our final card today is Wrap in Flames. Wrap in Flames is 3 and a red for a sorcery at common. Wrap in Flames deals 1 damage to each of up to 3 target creatures. Those creatures can't block this turn. So again, I would say sideboard only unless you see a whole bunch of X1s, in which case you could side it in, but 4 mana to kill 3 of them is pretty costly when we're looking at 2 mana for Underworld Fires. And if you are aggro, this can do like a blow the house down impression, but Blow Your House Down didn't even do that good of a job in the aggro decks in Throne of Eldraine, and there were definitely aggro decks in that set. So I don't think this card's going to see any main deck play, and I don't think it'll even see that much play out of the sideboard. I think it's like a D at best. So D for Wrap in Flames. So that's going to wrap it up for red. Red looks very aggressive. There's much less A's and even, I think, less B's here in red. but there's just a whole lot of really good aggressive C pluses. I think red's going to be very well situated with white to attack. I'm absolutely interested in doing black-red sacrifice stuff. So yeah, I would actually put red as one of the colors that I'm more excited to give a try to. Let me know what you think of all the cards here in red, what you agree with, disagree with, etc. Chat with me, chat with each other in the comments down below. If you do have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can always find me over on Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook. You can find me over on Twitch this Wednesday, January 15th, around 2:30 or 3 Eastern Standard Time. I will be playing Theros Undead Sealed for many hours. Thank you very much to Wizards for inviting me to the Arena Early Access event and giving me that stocked account. You can go over to patreon.com/SamanLeek if you want to help me out that way. Absolutely anything is appreciated. You get access to the patrons and Twitch subscriber Discord to chat and hang out and talk Magic or talk other games or talk whatever. At $5, you get access to the Pack One Pick One cards each week. You get your chance to win those each week. And of course, when you hit $60 lifetime, however long that takes you, you get a Mana Leak playmat from Inked Gaming. You can always go to inkedgaming.com/themanaleak if you're looking to get a playmat or dice bags or something like that, and let them know that I sent you. And the easiest way to help out is like, share, and subscribe. If you do have questions, comments, or suggestions, though, let me know. Otherwise, see y'all next time.